Hi, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy, and this is Jimmy. We're starting an 8-part reading of one of the most famous essays ever written by Niccolo Machiavelli. It's called The Prince. It's translated by Luigi Ricci. I think you'll find it very, very, very stimulating. This is part 1 of The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. As we read this, I want you to pay attention to the reading, not the notes on the side, but because we're going to go over that when we analyze this. This is a lot to analyze, a lot to think about. But welcome, Niccolo Machiavelli, to Lorenzo the Magnificent, son of Piero de' Medici. It is customary for those who wish to gain the favor of a prince to endeavor to do so by offering him gifts of those things which they hold most precious, or in which they know him to take a special delight. In this way, princes are often presented with horses, arms, cloth of gold, gems, and such like ornaments worthy of their grandeur. In my desire, however, to offer your highness some humble testimony of my devotion, I have been unable to find among my possessions anything which I hold so dear or esteem so highly as that knowledge of the deeds of great men, which I have acquired through a long experience of modern events and a constant study of the past. And with the utmost diligence, I have long pondered and scrutinized the actions of the great. And now I offer the results to your highness within the compass of a small volume. And although I deem this work unworthy of your highness's acceptance, yet my confidence in your humanity assures me that you will receive it with favor, knowing that it is not in my power to offer you a greater gift than that of enabling you to understand in a very short time all those things which I have learned at the cost of privation and danger in the course of many years. I have not sought to adorn my work with long phrases or high-sounding words, or any of those superficial attractions or ornaments with which many writers seek to embellish their material, as I desire no honor for my work, but such as the novelty and gravity of its subject that may justly deserve. Nor will it, I trust, be deemed presumptuous on the part of a man of humble and obscure condition to attempt to discuss and direct the government of princes. For in the same way that landscape painters station themselves in the valleys in order to draw mountains or high ground, and ascend an eminence in order to get a good plain view of the plains, so it is necessary to be a prince to know thoroughly the nature of the people, and one of the populace to know the nature of the princes. May I trust, therefore, that your highness will accept this little gift in the spirit in which it is offered. And if your highness will design to pursue it, you will recognize in it my ardent desire that you may attain to that grandeur which fortune and your own merits persuade for you. And should your highness gaze down from the summit of your lofty position towards this humble spot, you will recognize the great and unmerited sufferings inflicted on me by a cruel fate. Chapter 1. The various kinds of government and the ways by which that they are established. All states and dominions which hold or have held sway over mankind are either republics or monarchies. Monarchies are either hereditary, in which the rulers have been for many years of the same family, or else they are of recent foundation. The newly founded ones are either entirely new, as with Milan to Francesco Sforza, or else they are, as it were, new members grafted onto the hereditary positions of the prince that annexes them, as is the kingdom of Naples to the king of Spain. The dominions thus acquired have either been previously accustomed to the rule of another prince, or else they have been free states, and then they are annexed either by force of arms of the prince himself or of others, or else fall to him by good fortune or special ability. Just a side note now, he's giving advice to Lorenzo de' Medici, right? Chapter 2. Of hereditary monarchies. I will not here speak of republics, having already treated them fully in another place. I will deal only with monarchies, and I will discuss how the various kinds described above can be governed and maintained. In the first place, the difficulty of maintaining hereditary states accustomed to a reigning family is far less in new monarchies, for it is sufficient not to transgress ancestral usages and to adapt oneself to unforeseen circumstances. In this way, such a prince, if of ordinary assiduity, will always be able to maintain his position, unless some very exceptional and excessive force deprives him of it. And even if he is thus deprived, on the slightest mischance happening to the new occupier, he will be able to regain it. We have in Italy the example of the Duke of Ferrara, who was able to withstand the assaults of the Venetians in 1484, and also of Pope Julius in 1510, for no other reason than because of the antiquity of his family in that dominion. Inasmuch as the legitimate prince has less cause and less necessity to give offense, it is only natural that he should be more loved. And if no extraordinary vices make him hated, well, it is only reasonable for his subjects to be naturally attached to him, the memories and causes of innovations being forgotten in the long period over which his rule has extended. Whereas one change always leaves the way prepared for the introduction of another. Chapter 3. Of mixed monarchies. But it is in the new monarchy that difficulties really exist. First, if it is not entirely new, but a member, as it were, of a mixed state, its disorders spring at first from a natural difficulty which exists in all new dominions, because men change masters willingly, hoping to better themselves. And this belief makes them take arms against their rulers, in which they are deceived, as experience later proves, that they have gone from bad to worse. This is the result of another very natural cause, which is the inevitable harm inflicted on those over whom the prince obtains dominion, both by his soldiers and by an infinite number of other injuries caused by his occupation. Thus, you find enemies in all those whom you have injured by occupying that dominion. And you cannot maintain the friendship of those who have helped you obtain this possession, as you will not be able to fulfill their expectations. Nor can you use strong measures with them, being under an obligation to them. For which reason, however strong your armies may be, you will always need the favor of the inhabitants to take possession of a province. It was from these causes that Louis XII of France, though able to occupy Milan without trouble, immediately lost it, and the forces of Ludovico alone were sufficient to take it from him the first time. For the inhabitants who had willingly opened their gates to Louis XII, finding themselves deluded in the hopes that they had cherished and not obtaining the benefits that they had anticipated, could not bear the vexatious rule of their new prince. It is indeed true that after reconquering rebel territories, they are not so easily lost again. For the ruler is now, by the fact of the rebellion, less adverse to secure his position by punishing offenders, unmasking suspects, and strengthening himself in weak places. So that although the mere appearance of such a person as Duke Ludovico on the frontier was sufficient cause France to lose Milan the first time, to make her lose her grip of it for the second time was only possible when all the world was against her, and after her armies had been defeated and driven out of Italy, which was the result of the causes above mentioned. Nevertheless, it was taken from her both the first and the second time. The general causes of the first loss have been already discussed. It remains now to be seen what were the causes of the second loss, and by what means France could have avoided it, or what measures might have been taken by another ruler in that position which were not taken by the King of France. Be it observed, therefore, that those states which on annexation are united to a previously existing state may or may not be of the same nationality and language. If they are, it is very easy to hold them, especially if they are not accustomed to freedom. And to possess them securely, it suffices that the family of the princes which formerly governed them be extinct. For the rest, their old condition not being disturbed, and there being no dissimilarity of customs, the people settle down quietly under the new rulers, as is seen in the case of Burgundy, Brittany, Gascony, and Normandy, which have been so long united to France. And although there may be some slight differences of language, the customs of the people are nevertheless similar, and they can get along together. Whoever obtains possession of such territories and wishes to retain them must bear in mind two things. The one, that the blood of their old ruler be extinct, and the other, to make no alteration either in their laws or in their taxes. And in this way they will be in a very short space of time become united with their old possessions and form one state. But when dominions are acquired in a province differing in language, laws, customs, the difficulties to be overcome are great, and it requires good fortune as well as a great industry to retain them. And one of the best and most certain means of doing so would be for the new ruler to take up his residence there. And this would render possession more secure and durable. And it is what the Turk has done in Greece. In spite of all other measures taken by him to hold that state, it would not have been possible to retain it had he not gone to live there. Being on the spot, disorders can be seen as they arise and can quickly be remedied. But living at a distance, they are only heard of when they get beyond remedy. Besides which, the province is not despoiled by your officials, the subjects being able to obtain satisfaction by direct recourse to their prince. And wishing to be loyal, they have more reason to love him. And should they be otherwise inclined, they will have a greater cause to fear him. Any external power who wishes to assail that state will be less disposed to do so. So long as he resides there, he will be very hard to dispossess. The other and better remedy is to plant colonies in one of the two places which form, as it were, the keys of the land. For it is necessary either to do this or to maintain a large force of armed men. So the colonies will cost the prince very little. With little or no expense on his part, he can send and maintain them. He only injures those whose lands and houses are taken to give to the new inhabitants. And these form but a small portion of the state. And those who are injured, while remaining poor and scattered, can never do any harm to him, the prince, and all the others are, on the other one hand, not injured and therefore easily pacified. And on the other, are fearful of offending, least they should be treated like those who have been dispossessed. So to conclude, these colonies, they cost nothing, and they're more faithful, and they give less offense, and the injured parties being poor and scattered, they're unable to do mischief, as I have shown. For it must be noted that men must either be caressed or else annihilated. They will revenge themselves for small injuries, but they cannot do so for great ones. The injury, therefore, that we do to a man must be such that we need not fear his vengeance. But by maintaining a garrison instead of colonists, one would spend much more money and consume all the revenues of that state in guarding it, so that the acquisition will result in a loss, besides giving much greater offense, since it injures everyone in that state with the quartering of an army in it, which being an inconvenience felt by all, everyone becomes an enemy. And these are enemies which can do mischief. As though beaten, they remain in their own homes. In every way, therefore, a garrison is as useless as colonies are useful. Further, the ruler of a foreign province, as described, should make himself the leader and the defender of his less powerful neighbors, and endeavor to weaken the stronger ones, and to take care that they are not invaded by some foreigner not less powerful than himself. And it will always be the case that he will be invited to intervene at the request of those who are discontented either through ambition or fear, as we have seen when the Anatolians invited the Romans into Greece. And in whatever province they entered, it is always at the request of the inhabitants. And the rule is that when a powerful foreigner enters a province, all the less powerful inhabitants become his adherents, moved by the envy that they bear to those ruling over them. So much so that with regard to these minor potentates, he has no trouble whatever in winning them over, for they willingly join forces with the state that he has acquired. He has merely to be careful that they do not assume too much power, and authority, and he can easily, with his own forces in their favor, put down those that are powerful and remain in everything arbiter of that province. And he who does not govern well in this way will soon lose what he has acquired. And while he holds it, will meet with infinite difficulty and trouble. The Romans and the provinces they took always followed this policy. They established colonies and inveigled the less powerful with increasing their strength, without increasing their strength. They put down the most powerful and did not allow foreign rulers to obtain influence in them. I will adduce the province of Greece as the sole example. They made friends with the Achaeans and the Aetolians, and the kingdom of Macedonia was cast down, and Antigonus driven out, nor did they allow the merits of the Achaeans and Aetolians to gain them any increase in territory, nor did the persuasions of Philip induce them to befriend him without reducing his influence. Nor could the power of Antiochus make them consent to allow him to hold any state in that province. For the Romans did in these cases what all wise princes should do, who consider not only present but also future discords and diligently guard against them. For being foreseen that they can easily be remedied, but if one waits till they are at hand, the medicine is no longer in time, as the malady has become incurable. It happening with those hectic fevers, as the doctors say, which at their beginning are easy to cure, but they're difficult to recognize. And in the course of time, when they have not first been recognized and treated, become easily recognized and difficult to cure. Thus it happens in matters of state, for knowing afar, which it is only given to a prudent man to do, the evils that are brewing, well, they are easily cured. But when, for want of such knowledge that they are allowed to grow, so that everyone can recognize them, well, there is no longer any remedy to be found. And therefore the Romans, observing disorders while yet remote, were able to find a remedy, and they never allowed them to increase in order to avoid war. For they knew that war is not to be avoided and can be deferred only to the advantage of the other side. They therefore declared war against Philip and Antiochus in Greece, so as not to fight them in Italy, though they might at the time have avoided either. This they did not choose to do, never caring to do that which is now every day to be heard in the mouths of our wise men, namely, to enjoy the advantages of delay, but preferring to trust their own virtue and prudence. For time brings with it all things, and may produce indifferently either good or evil. But let us return to France and examine whether she did any of these things. And I will speak not of Charles, but of Louis, as the one whose proceedings can be better seen, as he held possession in Italy for a long time. And you will then see that he did the opposite of all the things which must be done to keep possession of a foreign state. King Louis was called into Italy by the ambition of the Venetians, who wished by his coming to gain half of Lombardy. And wow, that's the first reading, ladies and gentlemen, of The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to whip back here to the beginning, and because this is very important to understand what we're talking about. And then what we'll do on subsequent readings, we'll take little jaunts while we're reading. That was the entire reading without a break. Okay, so you can stop now, take a break, get a sip of coffee, whatever you want to do. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back here just for a moment, and I'm going to analyze the beginning. Okay? So The Prince was written by Niccolo Machiavelli to Lorenzo the Magnificent. So we're going to take a moment to just study the first paragraph. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, was born in 1449. Okay, there's a little note about here. He's the grandson of Cosimo de' Medici. The Medicis were a famous family in Italy. You can read about them. Not necessarily to know about them when we're reading Machiavelli. But he was a big shot, right? And so Niccolo Machiavelli he's writing to Lorenzo. This whole thing is to Lorenzo the Magnificent, and basically how to rule. It is customary for those who wish to gain the favor of a prince. So in those days, you want to gain the favor of a prince, to endeavor to do so by offering the prince gifts, which they hold precious, and on which they know him to take a special delight. So if you want to enjoy the favor of a prince, you give him gifts, right? So in this way, the prince gets horses, arms, blah, 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 blah. But Machiavelli, who's writing this, doesn't have that. It's my desire to offer to your highness, to Lorenzo, some humble testimony of my devotion I have been unable to find among my possessions that I hold so dear in esteem. Nothing I have is worth anything except the knowledge of the deeds of great men, which I have acquired through long experience of modern events and studying the past. So Lorenzo is basically offering this volume Niccolo Machiavelli is offering to Lorenzo his gift. What's his gift? The knowledge of the deeds of great men, to help Lorenzo, the prince, govern, and how to succeed and how to hold your estates, your kingdom, etc. So he studied this and he's experienced it. With the utmost diligence, I have long pondered and scrutinized the actions of the great. And now I offer the results to your highness. So that's what he's doing throughout this volume. He's going to offer what his study has shown him, what his observations has shown him about great men, the deeds of great men being rulers, right? Knowing that it is not in my power to offer you a greater gift than enabling you to understand in a very short time what I've learned at the cost of privation and danger in the course of my years. I've learned these things in a short time. I want you to understand them in a short time, because you don't have a long time. You just don't live long enough. So he imagine getting a letter like this, or a small volume as he talked like this. Imagine you gave this to your son, to your daughter. Imagine they gave this to you. Imagine someone gave this to you when you became a CEO of a company, a manager of a division of a company. Imagine having someone write down what it would take for you to succeed in your job, in your role. How would you react to that? This is BS. Would you? Would you say that? Think about this first page. So he says he hasn't adorned anything, and he has no desire, right, to honor for his work, but such as a novelty and gravity, nor will I trust be deemed presumptuous. He don't want to presume anything, right? So it is necessary to be a prince to know thoroughly the nature of people. I would say that that's a very astute observation, wouldn't you? That it is necessary for a prince, a leader, a CEO, a manager, a boss, to know thoroughly the nature of the people and the populace to know the nature of the prince. That's called communication. We want to know each other in order to rule, right? So then he ends this first introduction here, because it's really just the introduction, and then chapter 1 starts here. So he trusts that your highness will accept this little gift in the spirit which is offered. And if your highness will deign to pursue it, if you read it, you will recognize in my ardent desire that you may attain to the grandeur which fortune and your own merits persuades you. In other words, there you are, you're the boss, and just please accept this. So should you gaze down on the summit to my humbleness, you will recognize the great sufferings inflicted on me by cruel fate. Presage is a sign or warning that something bad will happen. Merits, something bad will happen to you. Unless you read my book. No, I'm kidding. Okay, this is all I wanted to say about in this first reading of The Prince. And then chapter 1, he goes into the kinds of government. He's not going to talk about republics. He's going to talk about monarchy. So he starts scientifically dividing these into, we're going to discuss this later in the analysis. But chapter 1, then he talks about hereditary monarchies, right? The ones you inherit. He gives examples, and you'll see these little red arrows. Whenever you see a little red arrow going forward, those are Jimmy's ways of telling you that's very important and that you should write that stuff down. Very important. He gives extended examples of what he's talking about. Chapter 3, he talks about mixed monarchies. So we have hereditary monarchies, mixed monarchies, and we should probably write down the names of these chapters so we're going to analyze. We want to watch how he makes observations about how a prince controls power. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this book, this beautiful, beautiful volume, this book is about power. When I was running my company, still running my company, I had a Russian lady that worked for me, and she said once, "You like psychology," in a Russian, in her beautiful Russian accent. You study people, don't you? I go, "Yeah, well, yeah, kind of, sort of." "You're a psychologist." "No, psychology is," he said, what I have studied my whole life is power. What is power? We're going to talk a lot about power, because that's what The Prince is about. It's a study of power. How they get it, how they retain it, and how they lose it. Very, very important. Not that we're all princes and princes and princesses, rulers, kings, CEOs, but if you watch business, this book is a blueprint for maintaining, acquiring power. Okay? Men change masters willingly, hoping to better themselves. That, if you just walk away from the first reading with that, men change masters willingly, hoping to better themselves. If you just walk away with that thought, you've gained something already, because that's what people do. Whether you're in a gang or whether you're in a company, right? Is that true even today? Do people kiss people's butts? Think of any organization and then take careful notes, okay? So chapter 3 of mixed monarchies, he goes on and on about those, gives plenty of examples. You'll see these little arrows, remember? When you see E.G., that's the example. That's the example, okay? You've been reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy. That was the first part of 8 parts on Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. Be sure to visit and read other classics on my website and come back for the reading of part 2. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day. Pay attention.